Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Mark from Solar Games. So requested topic from my channel is for some of the people who are new to investing in Magic. What kind of products do I recommend that you put your money into if you are looking to kind of like invest in actual Magic? I know this is a very unpopular topic, but honestly, I'm just going to talk about it anyways because that's what I do, you know? I know there's a lot of vitriol from people who are like, oh, we're players, and people like you, Mark, are ruining the game. I don't agree with that, but it doesn't matter because you can have your opinion and I can have mine. I will, however, help the people who are out there who want to know what I'm doing and why I do the things I do. And I just want to tell it like it is. You know, I don't care. It's not some sort of weird secrets that I can have to hold onto myself. But, you know, share basically the things that I already know. Anyways, let's get started. So, general recommendations for investing is I have this rule I call the rule of three, which means usually if you're just starting out or if you're doing something you don't know, you can always go with three. What do I mean by three? I mean, like, usually if you are playing a set that you like, I usually get, for example, 3 booster boxes, right? Draft boosters. It's pretty straightforward. It's easy because you use one to play, use one to like put in a binder, etc., and then one to kind of hold it sealed and collect. Now, this doesn't apply to every single product, but this applies really well to things like Secret Lair, maybe a commander deck, those kind of things, right? With commander decks, if you're playing, you don't really need one in the binder, so maybe you just have 2. That's okay too. All right. The other tip I want to give you is, number 2 tip is don't go crazy. Buy what's within your means, meaning if you are struggling to pay rent, if you're looking to like basically, you know, get the basics of your life taken care of, do that first. You shouldn't be putting money into a collectible because you could lose a lot of money in it, because this is a long-term play. This is not a short-term thing. You're not coming in here expecting to double your money within, you know, a month, 2 months, 3 to 6 months. Those events do happen, but they're very rare. Take it from me, I purchased Flesh and Blood Alpha Edition from Rudy, and these boxes went from $80 or whatever I purchased and got them for to like 9,000 at the highest. So they do happen, but they're very, very rare. Do not bet on them. That's not the way you should be looking at investing money in the game or anything, right? If it's too good to be true, it probably is, so step away. Number 3, this is related to number 2 above, is expect a bumpy ride. So if you're putting money into anything like this, don't expect it to be a smooth sailing, like, oh, it's always going to go up, etc. Now, in general, when we look at the long term, the average for Magic investing, pretty much all collectibles, this category, you're looking at about a 7 to 10% return on investment year over year. But again, average across a long period of time. It's not going to be immediate. Unfortunately, it's not even going to be year over year. Like, if I buy something for $100 next year, it's guaranteed to be 107. There's no guarantee in this market. It could go up or down. Obviously, if you buy something for much, much lower, your downside risk is very low and your upside potential becomes very high. So as an example, there are times when you should be buying reserve lists, there are times when you should be buying sealed products, etc. Take those opportunity when they come, and this is how the world generally works, and this is why I have this graph behind me. You can't really see it. It's a little bit off the screen here, but basically it's like it's the general chart of the fear index. Most of the time when everyone's euphoric about anything, hey, this market is going to go higher, it will never come down, that's the time you got to really start thinking and back away. If too many people are getting too excited about something, you really have to ask yourself, like, is that the right time to get into the market? It might be already too hot. Now, no one can ever predict a peak, no one can ever predict a bottom, a trough, but the whole idea here is that you're not trying to sell at the high and then buy at the low. What you're trying to do is maintain a general progression, but also have a calm and logical perspective when you're trying to make decisions like purchasing things like for collectibles. Yeah. So again, be ready for a bumpy ride. Your general time horizon for investment is going to be 3 to 5 years. So anything you buy, just be ready to hold on to that thing for at least 3 to 5 years. It is a long time, so be ready for that. If the product tanks right away, do not under any circumstances sell. And here's the thing, I see this all the time. There are a lot of people who will take their product and realize they're not making money, and they sell to people like me. And here's the thing, I will always take it if it's a low enough price, but I'm doing that because my bottom side downside risk is very low at that price. For example, let's, practical example here. Let's say you buy a booster box, you pay $100 for it. You think it's great, you like it. Dominaria United, okay? You pay $100 for it. And then at some point you're like, you know what, I'm not really sure about the market. Everything's going down right now. It's going to 80, 70, 60. Let's say it goes to like $70, $80, okay? $20, you're losing $20 from that booster box. You might look at it and say, I want to get rid of it now, right? Market price is 80, but if you sell it on a platform like TCG Player, eBay, you have to pay a fee, ship it. You might be landing only like $60 at the end, right? So you're losing $40 by trying to sell it at $80 per box. Then you meet someone like me, and maybe you have not just one, but like let's say 10, or you're sitting on 2 cases, so 12 of them. Okay, you come to me and you say, I want to dump my Dominaria United box. I won't be offering you 80. I won't be offering you 70. I'll probably offer you somewhere but between the 60-ish range, right? But that's going to basically reduce my downside risk to almost zero, right? And so in that moment, some people will say, sure, I'll take it, sell it. I don't want this toxic inventory on my asset. Give it to you. Don't do that. Okay, I'm telling you right now, don't do it. But if you're doing it, of course you can come to me. I'll take it. Okay. Now, because I am not afraid of sitting on that box for 10, 20, 30 years. Okay? So I know in 10, 20, 30 years, it will not be worth 60. Any amount higher than that, hey, I'm making a profit, right? So it works out like long-term for me. That's why I recommend, if you're going to be going to investing in collectibles, be ready for a 3 to 5 year time horizon. So what should you actually invest in? Okay? Some items I highly recommend is number one, reserve list. I love reserve list cards. Do a little research. Understand first of all, what cards are valuable, because there's a lot of cards on the reserve list that are not worth anything and probably will never be worth anything because they're just not very playable. They are on the reserve list, but they're not going to be printed. There are plenty of cards that will never be printed that are not on the reserve list, and they're not worth anything. So a card not being printed doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be valuable. You have to pick cards that are not going to be printed but have some form of playability, or they're useful in game, where if it's a limited supply and more players join the game, they would want this card. Conversely, there are a lot of cards that are not on the reserve list that are just not frequently printed, or even if they're frequently printed, there's still not enough supply. A very common version of this is Cyclonic Rift. Any Commander player knows, if you're playing Blue, you want a copy of Cyclonic Rift, right? This card is going to be it's been reprinted many, many times, but unfortunately, it was never significantly reprinted. And so every single time it gets reprinted, the price comes down a little bit, but then just shoots back up again because people need it. Another example is going to be Ristic Study or Smothering Tides. These are all cards that are going to kind of keep a consistent price because there's a high demand for those cards for decks pretty much forever. Okay? So reserve list cards, I recommend. There's probably some cards, do a little research. The risk with reserve lists in general is you want to make sure you understand how to tell the reals from the fakes. Because reserve list cards are so expensive, could be very expensive, then there are actually more benefit for people to try to do fakes. So you really have to protect yourself and understand how to tell the fakes. Specialty sets is my second recommendation. This includes master sets, Warhammer 40K Collector's Edition. These things that basically it's a one-shot print run, right? They're going to print once, and by and large, they're not going to print again. Unset is another good example. We have no clue what Infinity's print run looks like, and I don't think they're going to do a second print run. There may be still more product in the warehouse, but Infinity might be another product going in the future. That's kind of good. Along the same line, this has been holding true for a while, is that whenever Wizard tries something new, right, the first set that has this, the first collector's booster. So for example, Eldraine was the first collector's booster, and that collector's booster is holding price really, really well. So if you got in on that collector's booster the first time it was printed, you probably are doing okay, right? So there's a lot of these first times of some product. Jumpstart 2020, another good example of something that was printed one time, the first time, and it was just much, much better, right? Commander Legends 1. So a lot of times, these first time some product, usually they tend to do really well long term. Some other cards you can kind of invest in is going to be OG lands. So alpha, beta lands, basic lands, pretty easy. They're plentiful, but they're not that plentiful. For cards like this, I would highly recommend you buy like better condition, near mint, LP. I wouldn't really mess around with like MP or lower. If you're just buying it to play and to have them to swag out, go for it. But if you're actually wanting to hold value, you do want the higher and better condition ones because, again, that's where the premium comes in. So for reserve lists, the condition matters a lot, meaning you could have reserve list cards that, because in condition, you can tank the price up to like, 50%, 60, 70% even, if it's a really, really poor condition, to the near mint version. So that version, that condition is actually really important for any of these older cards. Historically low printed sets is also another good investment you can go into. Again, this kind of goes more towards your own personal interest, but things like, there are specialty foils that were always low printed or they had something special. For example, the 7th, 8th edition foils, 9th edition foils, even 10th edition, I think. Normally the 7th edition, those editions, they have white borders, but the foils were in black border and they had the shooting stars and they're just very unique. So 7th edition especially, because a lot of the artwork was unique in that set, those foils do have a pretty good premium on the market. In addition to that, for example, Urza's Legacy and Destiny, where foils was first introduced and foils were really rare in a box. Maybe I think back then maybe 1 per booster box, maybe 2. Those foils are something that you can actually put money into and hold long term. They're worth something. In a similar fashion, Lorwyn. Now, Lorwyn was not the first set to have foils, but because the set was printed in a time when Magic was doing not so well, it actually turned out that, basically because Magic wasn't doing so well, that those foils are actually a lot more rare than you think they are. So another one that's actually going to be pretty good for your investing. Other cards, things I like, I'm a big fan of Portal 3 Kingdoms because I love the 3 Kingdoms story. So I would buy Portal 3 Kingdoms cards because I just think, I like the art, I like the story. They are traditionally very, very low printed because the English version especially were only printed in Australia, so they were never available in the US. And that's why the supply of those cards are very low. Actually, I kind of want to take a trip to Australia one time and see if I can pick up a bunch of Portal 3 Kingdom cards from somebody's collection there. Might be kind of fun. And there are always these weird, specialty things like Judge foils, Judge promos, Guru lands. I would caution a little bit on the Judge foil. So personally, there's always a risk that they could reprint some of the Judge foil stuff and make it really not as worth it. A good example of this is going to be like, what's it called? The Phyrexian Praetor in Phyrexian text, that Judge foil. What's her name? I don't know why I'm blanking right now. The white one. But basically what happened was that they printed that same card in a secret layer, same art. The only difference is obviously it didn't have the DCI or Judge, foil, the set stamp. It had a different stamp for secret layer. But by and large, it's the same card. So there's always risk of something like that happening to a really cool Judge foil, and that could tank the price of that card. So just be a little bit careful with things like that. But in general, any specialty stuff like Guru Lands, for example, I have never seen them do anything reprint of that, but I guess in the future they could. So there's still risk of those being reprinted, and maybe the Guru Lands would tank a little bit because of that. So be a little careful on those, but something that's special, even Portal 3 Kingdoms, they could reprint it and make it tank. But I think the set is so unique and special that it's not likely they're going to print the same art. As you can see, they did reprint Imperial Seal in Double Masters 2022, but the art is totally different, so it really doesn't affect the old school card price, that much. All right. There are some of my friends who invest in things that I just kind of it's too risky for me, but if it works for you, great. They like to invest in modern cards, and by modern, I don't mean the format, I just mean more recent cards. And the thing is, with the recent cards, my general recommendation is that you got to be really careful. Sure, it is true that you could have a Ledger Shredder situation where the card comes out, everyone thinks it's not that great, it's like a bulk rare. I think I've sold a couple of Ledger Shredders in Streets of New Capenna back then for $2. and then they turned out to be like a card that's really good and went all the way up to like $19. Wedding Invitation, another one of these, right? Hallowed, what's it? Hallowed, what's that one? Hallowed Haunting from Crimson Vow, right? These cards could happen. There could be cards that are kind of hidden or whatever, and they kind of spike. Even Wandering Emperor, I think, was like that. In fact, you guys probably don't believe it, but I sold Meat Hook Massacres for $15 each because the card was tanking, and then that card turned out to be a $50 card. So there are definitely cases where a card could be a lot lower value than what they should be long term, right? It really depends on the play, and you guys know this a lot more than me because again, I'm more on the investment collecting side, less on the playing side, but I do play the game, just not as much as a lot of apparently my audience. So on that front, be careful with modern cards because for every ledger shredder there is out there is a hull break, hull breaker, right? Hull breaker horror. Like these other cards where they come out, they're really, really great. The price skyrockets, and of course it tanks later. So you really have to be careful because you never know. Maybe the cards you buy, they never do anything. They don't even go up. They might even go down, right? And unfortunately with modern cards, there are a lot of cards that come out and they just tank. So you have to be really careful when you put money down into those modern cards. So my recommendation is do not put money in them. It's more like gambling there, I think. Now, if you know like the game really well and you're one of the people who are like leading decks, net decking, maybe it's fine. But again, that's not something that I could really put my money down on, so that's not something I do. Yeah. Aside from that, that's pretty much it. The rest of it stuff, like, if you want, I often think it's just kind of fun to go buy collections, like large collections, and there's a lot of bulk you can kind of go through. Sometimes you find really cool cards that somebody didn't pick out. Those are always fun, but again, not necessarily something that's very investable. I definitely wouldn't pay a lot of money for that. Think of it more like a treasure hunt, so you shouldn't be paying like the price of a guaranteed treasure already, right? Because you have no clue if it's there or not. So be a little careful with those kind of things, obviously. But that's about it. So if you're looking to put money down investing in Magic, highly recommend sealed products, reserve list cards, but just honestly cards that you're going to use. So if you're a Commander player, for example, and you want to play Commander with certain more powerful cards, highly recommend you buy those cards, but buy the reserve list cards that you need, because those cards are going to hold price and probably just slowly tick up over time. And while that's happening, you're using the card, you're still playing with it. It doesn't devalue as long as you protect it well. And then by the end of it, when you're done, you can sell the cards and make a profit on it. So it's kind of a win-win situation for you. Anyways, those are my recommendations for investors. I hope that's helpful. And this is Mark, Solar Games. I'm out. See you next time. Peace.